So this is for autologous stem cell transplantation, and I have told that this in case of autologous stem cell transplantation, the stem cells are collected from the patient themselves, and next they are harvested, frozen and stored, and then they infused back into the patient after intensive therapy. So I have talked about the steps of this autologous stem cell transplantation, how you can take out the cells from the peripheral blood system, and then you can store them, and after you can infuse them. So we have also talked about that when we are going for an autologous stem cell transplantation, there are a few factors of concern. We have discussed about them. What are those? That first is, anytime the cells are removed from your body, so there is a chance of getting contaminated with different kinds of pathogen, viruses, bacteria. So it can cause diseases when these cells are reintroduced in the patient's body. So this is the first problem of autologous stem cell transplantation. Second is the manipulation, that when these cells or these stem cells which is need to be reinfused in the patient's body, they are need to be carefully manipulated. And why the manipulation is important, we have discussed about that. So during this manipulation process, that should be done very cautiously, because otherwise manipulation may hamper the normal functions of those stem cells. They actually hamper the normal cell growth control also. So it also need to be checked or need to be done very cautiously. And last one is that particular stem cell, they are very much tissue specific, their functions. So the cells should be reinfused in those positions where they naturally belong to. Otherwise they won't be able to survive, or they won't be able to solve the purpose for which they were reinfused in the patient's body. So that it was about the autologous stem cell transplantation. So today we will talk about the other process, which is allogenic stem cell transplantation. So obviously it is clear, this allogenic transplantation, the stem cells are collected from another individual, not from the patient's body itself. So the cells are collected from a matching donor and transplanted into the patient to suppress the particular disease and restore patient's immune system. So this is the key concept of allogenic stem cell transplantation. Now finding a matching donor is a key, or is the key to a successful allogenic stem cell transplantation. Now a donor is often maybe a brother, sister or other relative. In many cases the donor registries are also available. You can go and check the donor registries to find the appropriate match through tissue typing. Now the tissue typing uses proteins called HLA. HLA, what is HLA? Can anyone say what is HLA? Vibhash and Shantika? Well, is my screen is visible to you, the presentation? Please respond, anyone. So this HLA is nothing but human leukocyte antigen. So when you are going for tissue typing, actually they uses the proteins which is known as HLA or human leukocyte antigens, and these are found on white blood cells and tissues to determine whether a donor's stem cell are the right match or not. Now through an HLA test, pathologists compare the patient's blood and tissue type against a donor's blood sample. So there may be 4 kinds of comparison you can have. So this is the stem cells are collected from a matching donor, obviously. So they are HLA matched relative, often a sibling. So HLA matched relative. Condition 2, HLA matched unrelated donor. You can get them from the registries. Third one is HLA mismatched family member. The family member but HLA doesn't match. And last one is the unrelated umbilical cord blood. So in addition to using stem cells from a donor's circulating blood, stem cells from umbilical cord blood, which is known as cord blood transplantation, that may be used. Now stem cells in umbilical cord blood are less mature, meaning they have the potential to differentiate into various types of cells, and since the cells are frozen at birth, they have avoided environmental damage and aging. So basically they are less prone to infected by different kind of pathogens, and also they have the potency to become differentiated cell types. And since these cells are frozen at birth, so they also actually escape the aging process. So therefore cord blood transplants generally don't require an extremely compatible tissue types and may help to reduce the risks of complications. Now let's talk about the process, how actually it works. So before an allogenic stem cell transplantation, the patient undergoes a conditioning regimen which typically involves intensive treatment. Why? To destroy as many cancer cells as possible. They are treated with high doses of chemotherapy and radiation therapy, for example, just to destroy the cancer cells. Now afterward the patient is ready for the transplant. This is for, I'm telling, this is for leukemia cases. So afterward the patient is ready for the transplant, which typically occurs about 2 days after completing the conditioning regime. Now much like a blood transfusion, the donated stem cells are delivered intravenously. The procedure takes about an hour to complete. Now after entering the bloodstream, the stem cells travel to the bone marrow and begin to produce new blood cells in a process which is known as engraftment. I have talked it about yesterday also. The transplant restores the supply of normal cells that have been destroyed by the intensive therapies. Now in some cases a mini transplant may be recommended, which is nothing but an allogenic transplant that uses lower, less toxic doses of chemotherapy and total blood irradiation before the transplant procedure, before the actual transplant procedure. Now using low doses of anti-cancer drugs and is total body irradiation eliminates some but not all of the patient's bone marrow. It also suppresses the patient's immune system to prevent rejection upon transplantation. Now once the bone marrow cells from the donor begin to engraft, they may cause a graft versus tumor effect. This is another problem and may work to destroy the cancer cells and that were not eliminated by the anti-cancer drugs or TBI. So these actually helps. But to boost the graft versus tumor effect, patients may be given an injection of the donor's lymphocytes, which is immune cells. This is called donor lymphocyte infusion. Now after the transplantation, the hematology oncology team will collaborate to reduce the risk of post-transplantation complications and patients' needs throughout the stem cell transplantation process. Okay, now because it takes time to rebuild the immune system following a transplantation, doctors will monitor the patient closely in the months following the transplant. Sometimes high doses of chemotherapy and radiation may be needed before this stem cell therapy may cause side effects such as infections, blood counts will be checked, as it was done in case of autologous stem cell transplantation also, and if needed, patients may receive blood transfusion or to prevent or treat infections or bleeding issues. Now the question comes, the graft versus tumor effect, that was okay, or that was having a positive effect upon this allogenic stem cell transplantation. But an allogenic stem cell transplantation also carries another risk or complication, and this is actually causing a particular disease in patient's body, and this is known as graft versus host disease. This is a particular condition where the donated cells attack the tissues, patient tissues, and the lesser the tissue types match between patient and donor, the greater the risk of graft versus host disease. Now, certain drugs may be prescribed to reduce the risk of infection, but this is a point of concern of this allogenic stem cell transplantation. So, what happens in this graft versus host disease? So, it's a condition obviously occurs after allogenic transplantation. Now, here the donated bone marrow or peripheral blood cells view the recipient's body as foreign, and the donated cells or bone marrow attack the body. Now, there are several factors that are thought to increase the development of acute graft versus host disease or GVHD. The most important is donor recipient HLA match, human leukocyte antigen matching. If you can see the photo, this picture, you can see the donor contains the HLA which is not getting matched with the recipient HLA. So, it causes this GVHD. So, the differences between recipient and the donor, basically the reason of this disease. The differences can cause donor cells to recognize the patient's cells as foreign and lead to an immune response against the patient's tissues and organs. Now, recipient who is having this or who is receiving this peripheral blood stem cells or bone marrow from an HLA mismatch related donor or from an HLA matched unrelated donor have an increased risk of developing acute GVHD. So, there are two different kinds of graft versus host diseases. One is acute graft versus host disease, second is the chronic graft versus host disease. Now, if you check into the pathophysiology of this disease, you will see the mechanism behind this disease has three different phases, how they have developed. The first phase is the afferent phase, where the activation of the APC occurs. APC is what? APC stands for antigen presenting cells. So, the activation of these antigen presenting cells occur in the first stage of the disease. Prior to hematopoietic stem cell transplantation, radiation or chemotherapy results in the damage of activation of host tissues, especially intestinal mucosa. These allows the microbial products to enter and stimulate pro-inflammatory cytokines like IL-1, TNF-alpha, and these pro-inflammatory cytokines increase the expression of the MHC molecules. MHC is major histocompatibility complex. These MHC molecules and adhesion molecules on these antigen presenting cells. Thereby, it increases the ability of the antigen presenting cells to present more and more antigen. The second phase is the efferent phase of this disease development, which is nothing but the activation, proliferation, differentiation and migration of the effector cells. This phase is characterized by the activation of donor T cells, further enhances the expression of MHC and adhesion molecules, chemokines and the expansion of CD8 plus and CD4 plus T cells and guest B cells. So this is basically activating the different arms of the human immune system. And last one is the target tissue destruction, which is the effector phase. So in this final phase, these effector cells migrate to target organs and mediate tissue damage, resulting in multi-organ failure. So this is three basic steps of the development of this disease, graft versus host disease, due to the effect of allogenic stem cell transplantation. So now, as I have mentioned that here HLA has been an important role to play during this disease establishment, we will talk about something about these HLA molecules and obviously their integral role in immune regulation. So if you can see, I have written over here this human leukocyte antigen or HLA. We commonly know this molecule as MHC or major histocompatibility complex. Now, the major histocompatibility complex was initially discovered as a genetic locus associated with the acceptance or rejection of transplanted organ in mice. Now, in 1954, the same genetic system was described in humans by two scientists, and it was called from then it was called human leukocyte antigens or HLA. Now, this discovery was made as a result of the presence of antibodies against antigens expressed on leukocytes from patients who had received multiple blood transfusions. So, if you can see this figure, the MHC in human is located on the short arm of chromosome 6. Position is known as 6p21.3 and contains the most polymorphic gene cluster of the entire human genome. This gene system is the largest cluster in the human genome and it's divided into three main sub-regions: class 1, class 2 and class 3, which are all involved in immune response and suppression. So if you can see, the region is written over here. The HLA consists of three regions which have been designated as class 1, 2 and 3 based on the structure and the functions of the gene products. Now, the main function of the HLA class 1 gene product, as you can see here, the class 1 gene products HLA A, B, C, is to present endogenous peptides to responding CD8 plus T cells, while the class 2 MHC molecule codes for HLA-DR, HLA-DP, HLA-DQ. They have restricted expression and process exogenous peptides for presenting to the CD4 plus T cells. So, class 1 represents endogenous antigen to CD8 plus T cells and class 2 represent the exogenous antigens after processing to CD4 plus T cells, and the class 3 in turn contains genes which encode for immune regulatory molecules. You can see here tumor necrosis factor like TNF, factor C3, C4, C5 of complement system, and heat shock proteins. The HSP 70 stands for heat shock protein 70. So heat shock proteins. So these are the different functions of these three subdivisions of these MHC or HLA molecules found in the human system. Now, as you can see, class 3 gene space between MHC class 1 and class 2 genes, right? So, this is another figure. Well, before going to much details in the figures, just let's talk about these things once again. The glycoproteins, which is encoded by the MHC1 genes, they are present on the surface of all nucleated somatic cells, while the expression of class 2 MHC molecule MHC2 glycoprotein, that is largely restricted to the specialized APCs or antigen presenting cells such as dendritic cells, macrophages, and B cells. Now, both have extracellular domains that form the peptide binding region. Those of MHC class 1 molecules govern the presentation of peptide or antigen primarily derived from intracellular sources. I have mentioned it. They present endogenous peptides. So, to CD8 for T lymphocytes, those are cytotoxic T cells. While those of MHC class 2 molecules, they're particularly effective at presenting the peptides which are primarily obtained from extracellular sources, or it can be said as exogenous to CD4 plus helper T cells. So, these are differences of MHC class 1 and class 2 molecules. Now, this figure which is showing over here, this is showing the genetic architecture of human MHCs. It shows 3 main MHC classes of genes occupying about 0.1% of the human genome. The MHC ranks as the most gene-dense region in the human genome. 224 MHC loci have been so far isolated from humans, among which 20 to 30% are associated with a known or putative function in innate as well as in adaptive immune response. I guess you know what is innate and adaptive immune response. Not only in this innate and adaptive immune response, they also have the role in growth, development, mating, reproduction, odor and olfaction. So this would imply that MHC is working on contextually different aspects of evolution. As in mammalian genome, some MHC genes related to adaptive immune system, they are present in invertebrates genome also. And this would tell us that the origin of this adaptive immune system dates back to at least 400 million years ago. So there are this, you can see the detailed architecture of the human MHC molecules or the HLA molecule. Now there are 2 separate features of these MHC molecules, the distinct properties of this MHC molecule which actually make it difficult for pathogens to evade immune response in this way. That is the reason they have they are coming from 400 million years ago. They have evolved, they are constantly changing, so they must have some features. They have been in the invertebrates also for so long, so they have 2 key features which actually help the pathogens to inhibit or helps to inhibit the pathogen entry into the immune system. So first is the MHC is polygenic in nature. What it means? It means it contains several different class 1 and class 2 MHC genes, so that every individual possesses a set of MHC molecules with different ranges of peptide binding specificities. First is the polygenic, and second, the MHC is highly polymorphic in nature. That is, there are multiple variants of each gene within the population as a whole. The MHC genes are in fact the most polymorphic genes ever known. So we can say that the major histocompatibility complex is both polygenic, containing several loci encoding proteins of identical function, and polymorphic, having multiple alleles at each locus. So because of the polygyny of the MHC, every person will express at least 3 different antigen presenting MHC class 1 molecule and 3 or maybe sometimes 4 different MHC class 2 molecules on his or her own cells. In fact, the number of different MHC molecules expressed on the cells of most people is greater because of the extreme polymorphism of the MHC. And another point is they are codominant. The codominant expression of the MHC gene products, because I have told that they show the polymorphism, means they have multiple alleles at each locus and they show codominant expressions also. The term polymorphism means within species variation at a gene locus, and thus in its protein product The variant genes that can occupy the locus are termed as allele, Now there are more than 200 alleles of some human MHC class 1 and class 2 genes, and each allele is being present at a relatively high frequency in the population. So there is only a small chance that the corresponding MHC locus on both the homologous chromosome of an individual will have the same allele. Most individuals will be heterozygous at these MHC loci, and the particular combination of these MHC alleles found on a single chromosome is known as an MHC haplotype. Now the expression of this MHC allele is codominant, I have mentioned, with the protein products of both alleles at a locus being expressed in the cell, and both gene products being able to present antigen to T cells. That means the gene product, both of these gene products, they are functional, they are expressed as well as they are functional in nature, and the extensive polymorphism at each locus thus has the potential to double the number of different MHC molecules expressed in an individual, and thereby increase the diversity already available through polygyny. So this is the reason this is a very hard to find a perfect HLA matching donor, and if you are not getting a perfect HLA matching donor, it may result in the graft versus host disease. So what happens? Let's talk about the class 1 MHC molecule. So T cell receptors on the surface of cytotoxic T cells, they interact with peptide MHC class 1 complex. Now it has the ability to discriminate self from the foreign particle. Now these cytotoxic T lymphocyte cells, they are stimulated upon T cell receptor recognition of foreign peptides. Now these stimulated cytotoxic T lymphocytes, they promote the T cell proliferation and lysis in peptide pulsed target cells. Also, these MHC class 1 molecules interact with natural killer cell receptors like killer immunoglobulin like receptors, thereby controlling effective functions of these natural killer cells or NK cells that can damage self components, for example cell cytotoxicity and excessive inflammations they may cause. In this manner, these MHC1 molecules induce self tolerance via a NK cell dependent mechanism as well. This MHC class 1 molecule encodes glycoprotein, which is expressed on the surface of nearly all nucleated cell, as you can see from this figure, and the major function of this class 1 gene product is to present the peptide antigen, which is obviously the endogenous one to cytotoxic T cells, CD8 plus T cells, cytotoxic T cells. Now because of this, both self and non-self or foreign peptides can bind to class 1 MHC molecules, and it can differentiate between these both. A question may arise, what happens to these class 1 MHC molecules loaded with self peptides? So the answer lies within the process by which the T lymphocytes are selected in the thymus. Thereby these cytotoxic T lymphocytes can enter circulation if their surface T cell receptors is reactive to self class 1 MHC molecules loaded with foreign, not self, foreign peptides. Now this reaction is known as the class 1 MHC restriction of cytotoxic T lymphocytes, because it occurs only in the presence of self class 1 MHC molecules, as if class 1 MHC molecules act as parent to the cytotoxic T lymphocytes. Now there are two possibilities may arise. First one is the self class 1 MHC compatibility is necessary for sensitizing of the foreign peptide and thereby for binding and lysis of the target cells by cytotoxic T lymphocyte cells. Now in this case there might be specific MHC gene products and the interaction between them that function to distinguish self from foreign. Second one is the self components undergo changes in composition on encountering foreign antigens, so that their recognition is not possible unless a compatible class 1 MHC system is available. So this is how they actually differentiate. Now this class 1 MHC molecules, I have talked it again and again, bind to peptides and present them to CD8 plus cytotoxic T cells. In general, these peptides are derived from endogenous intracellular proteins that are digested in the cytosol. Now the peptides are then transported from the cytosol into the cisternae of the endoplasmic reticulum. Here they interact with class 1 MHC molecules, and this process is known as the cytosolic or endogenous processing pathway. Now the ability of an individual class 1 MHC molecule to bind to a diverse spectrum of peptides is due to the presence of the same or similar amino acid residues, or which is known as anchor residues, at several defined positions along the peptides. So here is the example. You can see the anchor residues. The blue residues are the anchor residues, and this is a non-numeric peptide eluted from two class 1 MHC molecules. Anchor residues that interact with class 1 MHC molecules tend to be hydrophobic amino acid in nature. So the bound peptides have two distinguishing features. The bound peptides with these MHC1 molecules, they have two distinguishing features. First one is they are 8 to 10 amino acids in length, and second one is they contain specific amino acid residues that appear to be essential for binding to particular MHC molecules. So this is about the class 1 major histocompatibility complex. Now coming to the class 2 major histocompatibility complex. So this also encodes a different glycoproteins expressed primarily on the antigen presenting cells like macrophages, dendritic cells and B cells, where they present processed antigenic peptides to T8 cells or T helper cells. Now this class 2 MHC molecules, they contain two different polypeptide chains. One is the 33 kilodalton and another is the 28 kilodalton. The molecular weight of two different chains, polypeptide chains of MHC class 2, which associated by non-covalent interaction. Again, the MHC class 2 molecules are membrane bound glycoproteins that contain external domains, a particular transmembrane domain and a cytosolic anchor segment. As you can see here, the glycoprotein has a particular membrane external domain, the alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, beta 2, and a particular transmembrane segment as well as a cytoplasmic tail. Now extracellular peptides or pathogens are engulfed by phagocytosis into macrophages and assembled into a vesicle which is known as the phagosome. Now lysosomes combine with this phagosome to digest all these substances, these externally derived or exogenously derived pathogens or peptides. Now they actually help them in the digestion and in order to extract their antigens. Now these MHC class 2 molecules orient antigens to the outer surface of the cell membrane, where these T helper cells stand ready to bind and assist the recognition of these exogenous antigens. Now recognition of a foreign antigen by these T helper cells would force more macrophages to phagocyte pathogens. Now, immunoglobulins are attached to the surface of B cells. Binding of a foreign antigen to these immunoglobulins induces the engulfment of the particular antigen by B cells. B cells prepare ingested antigen for presenting by MHC class 2 molecules. Now peptide MHC class 2 molecule complex would engage T helper cells and that promote the proliferation of antibody producing plasma cells. Now the antibodies produced by these plasma cells enter the circulation and form complex with matching antigens. matching antigen antibody complexes, they are susceptible to cleavage. Now this is the way how these MHC class 1 and class 2 molecules are very important in the initiation of cell mediated and antibody mediated immune responses. As a result they have always been in the center of attention of immunogenetics. Now, if you can remember, these MHC class 1 and class 2 genes continue as the most polymorphic genes in mammals. However, there are specific loci that exhibit a higher levels of polymorphism compared with other loci studied in the same population. Mounting evidences support that selective MHC polymorphisms might play a role in evolution too, so that they will be maintained within one species or even command one species to be transformed into another. Different hypotheses exist regarding profitable variations that are provided by these MHC polymorphisms, making them favorable to be accumulated by natural selection. So, for example, in the context of immunity, the overdominance hypothesis states that the individuals being heterozygous for those certain MHC polymorphisms, the so-called extraordinary polymorphisms will have an advantage over the homozygous individuals. That the MHC function is more powerful in terms of types of peptides that they can bind to, and as well as recognize of more peptide types, in turn would mean protection against a broader range of pathogens. So this is known as heterozygous advantage or overdominance selection. So this is solely due to the polymorphism trait of these MHC molecules. Now, if you can recapitulate that during this graft versus host disease, the physiopathology process includes 3 steps, right? In the first step, the conditioning regimen leads to damage of host tissues, especially the intestinal mucosa. You can see this from this figure A. Now this intestinal mucosa and microbial products translocate from the intestinal lumen to the circulation, which can stimulate and activate APCs or antigen presenting cells to secrete pro-inflammatory cytokines such as IL-1, TNF alpha. Now these pro-inflammatory cytokines increases in turn the expression of the MHC and adhesion molecules on the host cells, enhancing APC antigen presenting capacity. Now the second phase, you can see the activity of the effector cells. The second phase, here the donor T cell activation further increases the expression of MHC adhesion molecules, chemokines, expansion of host specific cytotoxic CD8 plus T cells and CD4 plus T cells as well as B cells. Now the next step is the damage of target organs. The final step, these effector cells then migrate to the target organs and mediate tissue injury, leading to multi-organ failure. All the immune system, all the arms of immune system starts to fight, starts to function together to damage all the targeted organs, resulting in multi-organ failure. In the final step, what happens is effector cells migrate to the target organs, and these immune cells actually and the molecules could be predictors of this disease development, right? So what happens? There are APCs Now I have talked about these. You can see here the host APCs, antigen presenting cell. So there are different antigen presenting cells, which are they like dendrite cells, macrophages. In summary, we can say this, that these APCs, dendritic cells or macrophages, effector T cells. So effector T cells include Th1 cells, Th2, Th17, abnormal Th17, Treg cells, B cells and NK cells, natural killer cells. All are implicated in this GVDH or graft versus host disease pathophysiology. So if you can see, pro-inflammatory cytokines, not only these molecules, there are pro-inflammatory cytokines like IL-17, IL-1 beta, TNF alpha. They are also increased in this GVHD. Co-stimulatory molecules are there that also play an important role in inducing a graft versus host disease. There are PRRs or pattern recognition receptors and complement system molecules like C3 mediate Th1, Th17 polarization in human T cell activation, and skin graft versus host disease and signaling molecules promote the inflammatory and immune processes of GVDH. So basically, by this summary or by this discussion earlier, you can have this idea that this graft versus host disease is not a simple one. This is basically a concerting effect between of different immunological molecules or different weapons of immune system, human immune system, that actually functions together, because they cannot identify the, or you can say they have identified the foreign one, the donor stem cells as the foreign one, and they will actually, those foreign donor cells actually initiate these problems, or they actually activate these factors of immune system in the patient's body, and as a result they will attack or they will hamper the normal system. They will result in multi-organ failure. So this is the graft versus host disease, or the molecular mechanism behind this disease. Now this allorecognition, this is done due to the during this allogenic transplantation process. So this allorecognition is the ability of an organism to distinguish its tissues from those of another organisms within the same species, and has important implications for transplantation. A risk of organ transplantation is the alloresponse. What is that? Alloresponse is where the histoincompatible antigens, that is happening actually here, you can see the histoincompatible antigen is recognized, producing an adaptive immune response via the employment of allospecific T cells. Now this can lead to specific rejection of the transplanted tissues. The MHC is involved in the direct mechanism of allorecognition, where T cell recognize determinants on the donor MHC molecule peptide complex displayed at the cell surface, and this is because the MHC molecules display an antigen determinant called on an epitope that is either self or non-self, with antigens from the transplanted cells recognized. Now if you go through this transplantation immunology, there are three different pathways. First one is the direct pathway, where the recognition of the intact foreign MHC on donor APC primes CD4 plus and CD8 plus recipient T cells. CD4 plus cells then provide T cell help for the effector function of CD8 plus cells. Second one is the indirect pathway. The recipient antigen presenting cells traffic through transplanted organ, phagocytose allogenic MHC shed from foreign cells through cell necrosis and apoptosis, and present the processed antigen or processed peptides in the context of self MHC class 2 to MHC class 2 restricted CD4 plus T cells. And last but not the least is the semi-direct pathway, the cell-to-cell contact between donor and the recipient APC. They may transfer intact membrane components including intact allo-MHC molecules. So, to prevent an allo response in non-tolerant recipient, immunosuppressive drugs can be provided but are known to cause long-term adverse effects. Increased understanding of this MHC role in tissue allo recognition may reduce the chances of this disease. They can go for immunomodulation, reducing the requirement of long-term immunosuppressions in the transplantation process. Another point you can go for that in case of human organ transplantation, human stem cell transplantation, one approach to reduce this graft immunogenicity is to minimize allogenic differences between donor and recipient by HLA matching. Ultimately, 0 HLA-A, HLA-B, HLA-DR, HLA-DQ mismatched transplants should be performed. Even without considering the existence of other important histocompatibility loci, this is extremely difficult to achieve due to extreme polymorphism of these MHC antigens and to the limited availability of fully matched donor. That is why I was emphasizing on this particular key feature of these MHC molecules, the polymorphism and the polygenic nature. So, in this context of this stem cell therapy, it is apparent that it would be similarly difficult. However, reducing HLA mismatching by choosing the least immunogenic combination can now be achieved by banking cells. Also, you can go for a cross-match assay, which may be the mandatory one in future. Currently, there are two main complementary tests that are available to check. First one is the complement dependent cytotoxicity assay or CDC assay, and next is the flow cytometry cross match assay to check the perfect match of the donor. So, this is all about the stem cell transplantation as well as the immunological problems associated with the immunological molecules behind this disease, as well as the molecular mechanism or the genetic architecture behind this immunological molecule to activating this particular disease during this transplantation process. So that's all for today. Is there any problem?